Considering you were abandoned, your real mother could have even been poorer than Aunt Susan's sister. When you think about it, it's really great that you can live in your house now. Well, it might be smaller than my house, though. Mirabelle said with a nasty smile, laughing ha 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 as she spoke to her niece. My son was appalled by Mirabelle's terrible slander and grabbed her shoulder, shouting, "Hey! Mirabelle! There's no need to say that much to a child, right? Isn't that too much?" "That's right, Mirabelle. That's too much. Sally's real parents might have had their reasons, and we don't know their situation. It's wrong to just negate them like that." I also condemned Mirabelle, agreeing with my son. Mirabelle lacked consideration for her niece too much. But it's not a normal family, Aunt Susan's family. Normally, you'd want to raise your own child, right? And yet, to choose to raise someone else's child is unbelievable. I couldn't do it. And to have a child whose background we don't even know in our house is honestly pretty creepy. Mirabelle continued her abusive speech with a smirk on her face, scratching her cheek. What? My son and I were lost for words at Mirabelle's outrageous remarks. This conversation was not something an 8-year-old niece should hear. I didn't want to stay here any longer and was thinking about taking my niece and leaving. It was when the niece who had been silent until then asked Mirabelle a question. I've been curious about this for a while, but who is the person living in the closet next to the living room?" The niece had a look of conviction on her face. Mirabelle turned pale and froze at the question. "I am Susan Young. I'm 60 years old, belonging to what society calls the senior generation. I run a law firm, holding the position of director, which is quite rare for a woman. Due to working too hard, I got married once but divorced after about 3 years. I have one son, who just got married and left home recently. However, I don't feel lonely. My law firm has been busy lately with an increase in referrals from clients. Plus, attending training sessions for self-improvement and occasionally drinking with fellow lawyers keep me enjoying my days. Yet, sometimes when I go to the mall alone, I see happy families and can't help feeling envious. If my marriage had lasted, I might not have felt this way. My niece, Sally, is my favorite source of comfort. Sally is the daughter of my sister, who is 5 years younger than me, and is currently 8 years old. Sally is not biologically related to my sister. My sister always wanted to have children. With the cooperation of her husband, they tried hard together but were unable to conceive and eventually gave up on fertility treatments. However, both loved children so much that they became a family through adoption when Sally was 3 years old. But Sally is a bit of an unusual presence. She has a sharp intuition, and from my perspective, it seems like she has some special abilities. Once, when my sister and Sally were coming to visit my house, I secretly hid some fancy sweets I had received from a client deep in the fridge. Sally loves sweets, and if she found them, she would insist on eating them. Especially since she can't resist fancy sweets and would fuss until she got to eat them. That's why I hid them, but after my sister and Sally arrived at my house for a while, Sally started fussing. I smell something good?" My sister laughed, not believing her. "What are you talking about?" Sally, sniffing around, pointed at me and said, "I definitely smell something good. Susan, you must be hiding some delicious sweets from me. They must be in the back of the fridge." I was quite surprised, but took out the fancy sweets from the back of the fridge. Sally was very happy, saying, "See, I knew it." My sister was surprised, saying, "Really?" Needless to say, all the fancy sweets ended up in Sally's stomach. This kind of thing has happened quite often. Today, Sally and I are going to visit my eldest son and his wife's new house, partly as a housewarming visit. The reason I'm with Sally is that my sister suddenly had to work on her day off. My sister's husband is always hard at work and rarely at home. So, when my sister has urgent matters, I sometimes end up taking care of Sally on short notice. After having a fun chat while holding hands with Sally, we arrived at my eldest son and his wife's new house. "Wow! It's so big and beautiful." Sally's eyes sparkled as she spoke excitedly. Indeed, my son and his wife's house was sparkling new, with white, pristine walls. Despite its proximity to the station and the high cost of the land, it was quite spacious. The house even had a garage big enough for 2 cars, making efficient use of the space. Then, feeling a bit nervous, I rang the doorbell. This was because it had been half a year since I last saw my daughter-in-law at their wedding. After a while, I heard footsteps and the front door opened with a click. "Hi." "Oh, Susan, long time no see." My daughter-in-law greeted me with a smile. "Mom. Thanks for coming today." My son followed, stepping out of the house to thank me. "Thank you for having me. And I'm really sorry for the short notice, but is it okay if Sally comes along? I had to take her in unexpectedly." I told my son and his wife. "Nice to meet you, I'm Sally. Glad to see you." Sally greeted, her face tense with nervousness. "Of course, that's fine. Sally, is it? How cute." My son spoke to Sally with a big smile. I was just starting to relax when my daughter-in-law's shrill voice cut through. "Eh? Are kids okay? I mean, it's our new house. Won't they make a mess?" My daughter-in-law seemed a bit displeased. She appeared to be in a bit of a bad mood. "It's fine. Sally often comes to my house too, and she's a well-behaved girl." I tried to reassure my daughter-in-law. "Well, if you say so, Susan. But make sure not to touch anything in the house or open any doors to other rooms or closets without permission, okay?" My daughter-in-law glared sharply at Sally, pointing her finger sternly. Sally, being a gentle child, seemed to shrink a bit under her gaze, which was a bit pitiful to see. Afterward, my daughter-in-law served us tea, and we chatted about trivial things for a while. The conversation topics ranged from celebrity marriage news to popular local stores. Sally, seemingly uninterested in the conversation, quietly ate her snacks. Noticing Sally's demeanor, my son started a conversation with her. "Sally, you're pretty cute. Do you take after your dad or your mom?" He wasn't aware of the adoption, so his question was just casual small talk without any ill intent. But Sally already knew she wasn't biologically related to my sister, which made it a delicate subject. As I was wondering how to handle the situation, Sally started to speak up. "I don't look like either. Because I'm not biologically related to my dad and mom. I don't even know where my real parents are." The atmosphere turned heavy in an instant. Clearly, my son felt he had asked something terribly inappropriate, as he looked quite flustered. Then, my daughter-in-law chimed in. Sally's an adopted child? That's so sad." While my son and I were stunned, my daughter-in-law laughed heartily at Sally. "Then, Sally might not be able to have a happy marriage, you know? Because of the cycle of negativity and all." My daughter-in-law said with a sneering smile. "That's incredibly rude of you. Sally, I'm sorry." My son scolded his wife and apologized to Sally. "It's okay, it's the truth. Please don't worry about it." Sally, perhaps out of concern for my son, acted as if it was no big deal. My daughter-in-law had a look as if she couldn't understand what she did wrong. I was furious at my daughter-in-law's appalling behavior. Completely insensitive to an 8-year-old child. At the same time, I felt terribly sorry for Sally, having to endure such treatment from my daughter-in-law. "Let's give you a tour of the new house." My son tried to lighten the heavy mood, adopting a deliberately cheerful tone. "I think you'll be surprised. It's quite spacious." My daughter-in-law, seemingly forgetting her earlier faux pas, cheerfully engaged with us. The conversation flowed smoothly for a while. Then, with a smile, my daughter-in-law opened the kitchen door. "Here's the kitchen. And it's the trendy island style, too. Cool, right? I really insisted on this when we ordered it." My daughter-in-law boasted as if on cloud 9. "Yes, it's amazing." I agreed, as the kitchen was spacious and seemed quite expensive, luxurious even. In that manner, we were guided by my son and his wife through various rooms, including the bathroom, toilet, and bedroom. Occasional comments from my daughter-in-law, like "pretty nice, huh?" Sally must be quite envious of this room, were unnecessary, though. After taking a tour of the new house, we returned to the living room and sat down for tea again. My daughter-in-law seemed pleased to have shown off each room. "Our house is much nicer than Sally's, don't you think? We visited a lot of model homes and were very selective," she said, once again boasting to my niece. Boasting to an 8-year-old child like that seemed quite immature. I was frowning at this. My daughter-in-law, apparently pleased by Sally's quiet nodding, became even more boastful. But Sally, your real mom and dad live somewhere else, right? Considering you were abandoned, your real mother could have even been poorer than Aunt Susan's sister. When you think about it, it's really great that you can live in your house now. Well, it might be smaller than my house, though. My daughter-in-law said with an unpleasant smile, laughing ha 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 as she spoke to my niece. My son, appalled by my daughter-in-law's terrible words, grabbed her shoulder and shouted, "Hey Mirabelle. There's no need to say that much to a child, right? Isn't that too much?" "That's right, Mirabelle. That's too much. Sally's real parents might have had their reasons, and we don't know their situation. It's wrong to just negate them like that." I also condemned Mirabelle, agreeing with my son. Mirabelle lacked consideration for my niece too much. But it's not a normal family, Susan's family. Normally, you'd want to raise your own child, right? And yet, to choose to raise someone else's child is unbelievable. I couldn't do it. And having a child whose background we don't even know at our house is honestly quite creepy. Mirabelle continued her abusive speech with a smirk on her face, scratching her cheek. What? My son and I were lost for words at Mirabelle's outrageous remarks. This conversation was not something an 8-year-old niece should hear. My niece must have been quite hurt. I didn't want to stay here any longer and was thinking about taking my niece and leaving. It was when the niece who had been silent until then asked Mirabelle a question. I've been curious about this for a while, but who is the person living in the closet next to the living room?" My niece had a look of conviction on her face. Mirabelle turned pale and froze at the question. "The room next to the living room, you mean the nook? We're not using that as a room. It's just filled with Mirabelle's stuff, so it's more like a storage room." My son answered with a smile. "So, is the person living in the closet because the nook is too cluttered with stuff to live in?" My niece asked my son with a puzzled face. "There's no way someone is living in the closet, right? What are you talking about, Sally?" My son retorted back at my niece, a bit panicked. "We're newlyweds, you know? We don't have any children yet, and it's just the two of us living in this house. There's no way someone else is here, right? Right, Tom?" Mirabelle pressed on, talking to my son. My son, seemingly overwhelmed by Mirabelle's fervor, responded with a strained face. Something about Mirabelle seemed desperately hidden, feeling off to me. Come on. There's definitely someone in the closet. Sally doesn't lie." My niece puffed up her cheeks as she spoke. She was so straightforward and cute that I couldn't help but think so. Then I stared intently at Mirabelle. Considering everything so far, my niece's intuition strangely tends to be accurate. Plus, Mirabelle's behavior has been clearly odd since a while ago, and indeed, her eyes were darting around. I thought we should check the closet at least once. Looking at my son, he seemed to feel the same and nodded at me slightly. So, I said in a deliberately cheerful tone. "Hey, since Sally is saying this, why don't we take a look in the closet just once?" "No, there's really no need to check the closet, right?" Mirabelle refused, waving her hands more frantically, her expression turning a bit irritable. It made her all the more suspicious. "But I'm really curious. I promise we won't touch or break anything inside the closet." My niece desperately spoke to Mirabelle. "Mirabelle, since Sally is saying this, why not show us just once? Besides, Sally is quite a mysterious child, and her hunches tend to be right. What if, hypothetically, there was a burglar hiding in the closet? Wouldn't you be worried?" I spoke to Mirabelle in a convincing tone. At this point, I suspected Mirabelle might be up to no good, but I tried not to show it. "Well, but..." Mirabelle hesitated. Come on. Mirabelle. Susan and Sally are saying so, let's just take a look in the closet, okay? There's nothing weird in there, right? My son, seemingly deciding enough was enough, spoke bluntly. "Wait a minute. Let's leave the nook and closet for another day, okay? I'll clean it up nicely, okay? Let's do that, shall we?" Mirabelle persisted, seemingly having something she desperately didn't want us to see. Seizing the moment, I stood up decisively. "That's enough, Mirabelle. You're hiding something in the closet, aren't you? Let me check," I said and briskly opened the door leading to the nook next to the living room. Looking inside the nook, it indeed seemed to be a storage room, as she said. Cardboard boxes were placed everywhere, creating a cluttered scene. Amidst this, Mirabelle said, "Susan, now that you see it's just a storage room, we're good, right? Let's go back to the living room quickly, trying to pull my arm to prevent further intrusion. However, what I wanted to check was the closet Sally mentioned. But Mirabelle, seemingly very reluctant to have it seen, grabbed my arm and wouldn't let go. Then, Sally slipped by us into the nook and stood in front of the closet. "Sorry, Auntie. I just really need to know, so I'm going to open it." Saying so, Sally energetically slid open the closet doors with a bang. And when we looked inside the closet, to our surprise, there was a man lying down, asleep. "What the hell, Mirabelle? Why is there a stranger sleeping in our closet?" My son was furious, shouting at Mirabelle. Mirabelle's face went beyond pale to sheer white. All she could say was, "I'm sorry." "Mirabelle, what is this about? You just got married to Tom, and you're already having an affair?" Although I was angry, confusion prevailed. The man sleeping in the closet appeared to be in his early 20s. Quite handsome, but severely emaciated. I thought he was sleeping, but upon closer inspection, he seemed to be in a semi-conscious state. Moreover, his mouth was carefully covered with cloth, as if to prevent him from speaking. His hands were restrained with toy handcuffs, making it impossible for him to escape. As my son and I were silent due to the shock of the situation, my niece asked Mirabelle, "Auntie, did you kidnap this person?" I thought it was incredible how calmly my niece could ask in this situation. When asked by my niece, Mirabelle, who had turned completely pale until then, defiantly answered, "So what if I did," with a nonchalant expression. "Mirabelle, do you even realize what you're saying?" My son's voice trembled, likely due to his considerable agitation. Well, anyone would react the same way in such a situation. "Yes, Mirabelle. Kidnapping is a crime, you know?" My voice also went high-pitched as I spoke. But I couldn't help it. Tom may have money, but he looks like a bear. I wanted a child with an angelic, cute appearance like Sally. But with Tom, I couldn't expect such a child. So, I wanted a child only from someone with a wonderful appearance," Mirabelle said nonchalantly. "But that doesn't justify kidnapping an attractive man." I involuntarily furrowed my brows. "Is this man your lover or something?" Given the situation, he didn't seem like a lover, but I asked Mirabelle just in case. "A lover? Of course not. This guy was a bartender at the club I used to go to, and I always requested him. But he suddenly got fired due to some trouble with the club and was about to be kicked out of his dorm. So, I told him I'd take care of him for a while if he came to our house, and I brought him here." Mirabelle answered with a laugh. "Then why is he so weakened? It was with his consent, right?" I asked Mirabelle, utterly baffled. "Well, after he came to our house, he found out we were married because of the shoes at the entrance. He thought I was single, and when he realized the truth, he tried to escape. So, I made it so he couldn't," Mirabelle said, puffing out her chest. I was utterly taken aback by Mirabelle's brazen attitude. My son was too shocked by what he was hearing to speak, just opening and closing his mouth. "Anyway, if you brought him here by force, you're a criminal. Of course, I'll be reporting this to the police," I said firmly and dialed 911 in front of Mirabelle. "Huh? Why are you bringing the police into this? I just brought someone here who lost his job and had nowhere to live, out of goodwill. It's like a form of helping people. If anything, I deserve thanks." Mirabelle turned her face away, saying it offhandedly. Despite the man, who was a bartender, being so weakened, I couldn't believe how Mirabelle showed no signs of remorse. In fact, it was unbelievable she didn't think she was doing anything wrong. Amidst the unbearable situation, silence fell, and then, Mirabelle, "I'm going to divorce you," my son murmured. "Why? Tom is my ATM, right? If you can't even serve as an ATM, you're useless. I will never agree to a divorce," Mirabelle snapped back at my son. Mirabelle's eyes were bloodshot, and she seemed almost insane. While shielding my niece behind me, I said, "In this situation, you can definitely get a divorce. You know what I do for a living, right? I'm a lawyer. I'll make sure Tom and you get divorced by any means. And yes, after such a disgrace, I plan to sue you for the maximum amount of compensation, so be prepared for that." I spoke to Mirabelle in a matter-of-fact tone. Yes, my main profession is a lawyer. In a case like this, I can easily handle to ensure a divorce. Mirabelle finally seemed to understand that Tom was serious about wanting a divorce. No. I don't want a divorce. Please, Tom, forgive me. Mirabelle sobbed, trying to get closer to my son. She probably never even considered the possibility of divorce. At that moment, my niece, who had been hiding behind me, stepped forward. Auntie. Blood relations might be important, but in such an environment, any child born would never be happy. Even if they were born looking cute, they would live their life resenting you. Yes. Even if they are born with such an unreasonable mother, they might just run away. Wanting a cute-looking child and causing so much trouble to others and committing crimes, such a person doesn't deserve to have children. I murmured. My son began to speak as if he had made up his mind. Mirabelle. Never show yourself in front of us again. I used to think I'd be happy if we had children in the future, but now I don't even want to see your face. Beginning today, we are strangers. If there's anything in the future, we'll settle it in court. Mirabelle continued to shed tears, seemingly at a loss for words. After a while, the sound of the arriving police officers was heard. Eventually, Mirabelle was arrested. The kidnapped bartender had been reported missing by his family, and it had become a significant issue. Though the bartender had to be hospitalized due to malnutrition, there was no life-threatening condition, and he was expected to be discharged after some time. When my son visited him once, he tearfully thanked him repeatedly, saying, "Thank you so much for saving me." He plans to sue Mirabelle for hospital fees and compensation, so I'm thinking of introducing him to a lawyer I know. Since then, Mirabelle has repeatedly demanded to see my son. Several letters have come to my son, saying things like I need help and I was wrong, I want us to start over. I also received a letter from Mirabelle. It read, "I'm sorry for everything. Please ask Tom to reconsider the divorce and not to sue for alimony." Of course, I tore up the letter and threw it in the trash. Mirabelle was selfish to the end. It looks like she'll have some time to reflect on her actions, but I have no intention of helping her. Since then, my son has sold the newly built house. When I asked him, "Are you sure?" he said, "There are too many memories here." Fortunately, since the house was new and not old, a real estate agent was able to buy it for an amount that could offset the mortgage. I'm truly glad about that. Also, after explaining his situation and divorce, my son has been actively introduced to women by sympathetic colleagues and friends. He has a dinner date today with a woman a friend introduced him to. My son may look like a bear, but at heart, he's a kind soul. I'm sure he'll find someone who is drawn to his character and willing to marry him. I've been busier than ever with work. Lately, I've gotten even more referrals, which has reduced my personal time. But even so, I make time to visit my niece. Recently, we've been meeting up more often, including my sister and her husband. They both say, "We want to spend more time with Sally," and have been saving work hours for it. My niece always clings to her parents saying, "I love Mom and Dad the most." The three of them look like a real family to anyone who sees them. Then my niece glances at me and says, "I love you too, Susan," with a smile. Her smiling face is incredibly cute. I hope to continue having fun times with my niece and her parents like this.